Hey, what's up? I'm Darkbblue, trying to help you enjoy games in depth. Crafting rare gears is an important way to improve your build in Path of Exile 2. There are suitable methods for crafting in both early game and late game. In this video, I will show you 3 crafting methods from the most basic to the most high-end, as well as an additional method to surprise RNG. Let's first go through how a gear is consisted in PoE 2. Judging from rarity, gears are divided into normal, white, magic, blue, rare, yellow, and unique, orange. The first 3 rarities belong to the same system, while unique gears are, as the name indicates, unique and different. Unique gears usually have fixed affix types and varying affix values, usually used to provide special synergy mechanics. On the other hand, the affix type and affix value of rare gears are both randomized, often used to provide base stats. A gear consists of a base type and some affixes. If you look at a white gear, what you see is the base. It has a base damage or defense value, some crit chance, attack speed, and sometimes an implicit affix. All the other affixes added on top of this base are called explicit affixes. Explicit affixes are random, really random. For example, a crossbow A may have increased physical damage affix, while another crossbow B has accuracy affix. Apparently, these affixes are rolled from a pool. But if we want to be more specific, 2 pools. One is prefix pool and the other is suffix pool, and they contain different affixes. White gears have no affix. Blue gears have 1 prefix and 1 suffix at most. For most rare gears, at most 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes are allowed. Some rare types, such as jewels and tablets, have only 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. Here's a tip. When you put your mouse on your gear, try pressing Alt key at the same time. This will display the affixes of this gear in a more professional way. With that said, time for the most basic crafting method, one-way pass crafting. Suppose we have a white base. Next, we can use an orb of transmutation to convert it into a blue gear with 1 affix. Then we can use an orb of augmentation to add another affix to it. Next, we can use a regal orb to make it rare, adding the 3rd affix. And finally, spam 3 exalted orbs to fill its affixes. Alternatively, you can use an orb of alchemy in place of the regal orb. This will directly make it a full mod gear, and at the same time, reroll the 2 existing affixes. This is a way to reroll affixes if the 2 initial affixes are bad. Beyond the basic currencies, you may also use a base currencies to desecrate this gear. This can be accessed as early as in Act 2, where you can find the base faction in the Well of Souls. After desecrating the gear, you can further reveal the affix in the Well of Souls. This allows picking 1 from 3 candidates, and you can roll desecrating specific affixes that cannot be rolled with basic currencies. You may have noticed that the currencies have greater and perfect versions besides the basic versions. To explain this, we need to know the levels and tiers of affixes. Let's go to PoE2DB website and choose the modifier page. Here we can see a certain affix type has many different versions, each having different levels. A higher level version also has higher value ranges, and a higher level version is denoted by a smaller tier number, with T1 being the best affix. You can reroll the values of affixes with a divine orb, but they can only roll within the range of the current tier. The item level determines the max affix level it can roll. For example, a level 50 gear can have no higher than level 50 affixes. This is why you can only see low tier affixes in early campaign, but more high tier affixes start to show up later. Here we need to distinguish item level from requirement level. By pressing Alt key, we can see the actual item level shown on top of the gear panel. Basically, the best affixes only roll on level 82 gears. However, only a small portion of affix types require level 82 for their highest tiers, so you don't always need to pursue a level 82 gear. While the item level determines the max affix level, the currency version determines the minimal level. This effectively blocks out low-tier affixes, making it more likely for high-tier ones to roll. However, if the highest tier version of a certain affix type has a level even lower than the currency level, it can still roll. All in all, both the item level and the currency version restrict the range of affix level that can roll. You can make use of this knowledge to better roll affixes. Now let's talk affix weights. Simply put, the probability to roll different affixes is not uniform. Some powerful affixes such as skill level affixes are less likely to roll. Affix weights are a way to describe the exact probability, where a higher weight means higher chance, and all the weights can be found in PoE2DB as well. Okay, now we know the most basic methods to add affixes to a gear, but we don't know how to remove affixes yet. Therefore, the most basic crafting method is called one-way pass. Although this may look very basic, it can still be strategic. Specifically, you can decide when to stop. If the first few affixes are bad, you can stop early to save currencies. Obviously, one-way pass crafting is highly RNG based, and if you are not lucky, the entire gear will be bricked, forcing you to start with a new gear. The following two crafting methods address the two problems correspondingly. Deterministic crafting suppresses RNG, and rerolling crafting allows removing affixes. So let's talk advanced crafting, deterministic crafting. There are many special crafting currencies, such as essence, alloy, and liquid emotion, that can add a fixed affix to a gear. This can effectively suppress RNG. Notice that lesser, regular, and greater essences are applied to blue items, adding a new affix, and perfect essence, alloy, and liquid emotions will first remove an affix and then add a new one. Since a rare gear may have at most 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes, let's say you already have 3 prefixes, and you are using a crafting currency that adds a prefix. The game has to remove a prefix so that the newly added affix can fit in. However, if there are less than 3 prefixes at the first place, both prefixes and suffixes may be removed. As you can see, if you use a crafting currency that first removes and then adds, there's still RNG as for which affix is removed. However, it's still much better than the basic crafting method. Beyond this, there's also a way to guarantee removing a useless affix. This can be done only when the corresponding affix section is not full. For example, I'm using a crafting currency that adds a prefix. Then, the gear must have less than 3 prefixes. In this case, I can add a useless suffix to the gear with a dextral exaltation omen, then use a dextral crystallization omen to guarantee only this useless suffix can be removed. In patch 0.5, a new restriction is introduced for crafting currencies. Normally, only one crafting affix is allowed. You can use a certain augment someone's creativity to add one more crafting affix. This augment may be a bit expensive, but it's still a good crafting method before you can afford more high-end crafting. Also notice that you can safely remove this creativity augment after the crafting is done. Now you might feel that deterministic crafting is very good, so why is it just advanced crafting, not high-end crafting? This is because both the types and value ranges of crafting affixes are limited. For example, for a martial weapon, You can only add flat physical damage, but not increased physical damage with crafting currencies. This is why blue bases with increased physical is much more expensive than those with flat physical. For another example, the skill level crafting FX is +3 for two-handed weapons, but +5 can be rolled naturally, which is higher. Therefore, with only deterministic crafting, you can only craft mid-tier gears, not really high-end ones. However, I don't mean that high-end gears don't need crafting affixes at all. This is because only part of the crafting affixes are worse than natural ones. There are also crafting affixes that are special and can be used on the high-end gear. So let's see an example. First, buy or farm a blue base with an increased physical prefix. Use Greater Essence of Aberration to add flat physical prefix. Then, fill the remaining affixes and use a Perfect Essence of Battle to add +3 level. If you want something better, you can find a rare base that already has both increased physical and flat physical, as well as an empty prefix. First sacrifice a suffix to add physical gain, and then add +3 level. Now it's time for high-end crafting, rerolling. The key is that we can, in fact, remove affixes. This mainly relies on two currencies, Chaos Orb and Orb of Annulment. Chaos Orb functions like perfect essences. It removes and adds an affix. And Orb of Annulment is simpler. It only removes an affix. With this new ability unlocked, we can remove unwanted affixes so that the gear won't be bricked. Naturally, you don't want to remove the good affixes you already rolled, so we need a series of methods to restrict the range of removal. This mainly comes in the form of omens. For example, Sinistral or Dextral Erasure or Annulment omens makes Chaos and Annulment Orb remove only prefix or suffix. Omen of Light, on the other hand, makes Annulment Orb remove only Desecration affix. Additionally, you can also use Fractured Orb to lock one affix, where the locked affix won't be touched at all. Here's a small trick. Normally, Fractured Orbs can only be applied to a gear with at least 4 mods, so it's a 1 in 4 chance. However, you can also apply it to a gear with 3 regular affixes and 1 Desecration affix. Since Desecration affixes will never be fractured, it raises the chance to 1 in 3. You not only want to prevent good affixes from being removed, but also want it to be easier to roll good affixes when adding new ones. Now recall what we've learned about affix weights, so here's another trick. You can first add an affix that has very high weights, even when it's not good for you. This can effectively block this high weight affix from being rolled, increasing the chance of rolling what you really want. Usually, this blocker affix is added as a desecration affix, so that you can later remove and add something else with an Omen of Light. There are some other common practices when rerolling. First, it's common to start with fracturing a good affix and kill spam to get the second affix. And second, it's common to add a crafting affix with the crystallization omen as introduced before to guarantee a good affix. And third, it's common to use Omen of Light and Desecration over and over to roll a good affix. This is often used on the third or even later affixes. Omens of Light can be extremely expensive. A trick to bypass it can be used as long as you have only one affix to roll on a specific prefix or suffix section, and the other section is full. For example, let's say you are rolling a prefix with all the suffixes full. Instead of Omen of Light and Anointing Down, you can use a perfect essence that adds a prefix, paired with a Sinistral Crystallization Omen, guaranteeing it to remove only the Desecration prefix. Then use Essence of Abyss with Sinistral Crystallization to add the Desecration effects back. When using this trick, the game may sometimes say it cannot find any space for mods. This is because the Essence of Abyss is trying to add a suffix, but the suffix is already full, so just keep trying until it tries to add a prefix and succeed. Now a problem is that such rerolling crafting can be very expensive, so for better calculating the cost, you can make use of a website called Craft of Exile 2. Note that there's another website called Path of Crafting 2, which is not as good and useful. First, let's make a base using the emulator, and code a crafting workflow using the simulator. Finally, you can run the simulation to see the average cost. Let's see an example of Summon Scepter. The goal is a +4 level suffix, a crit bonus suffix, an increased augment effect suffix, an increased damage prefix, and a flat damage prefix. First, I buy a base with +4 level and crit damage as well as an empty suffix. Then I can sacrifice a prefix with Sinistral Crystallization Omen to add the crafting effects that increases augment effects. If you can't find any with an empty suffix, you can also directly use the alloy and succeed with a 1 in 3 chance. In this way, the suffix is finished. Now we can notice that the increased damage prefix has very low weights, while mana's weights are very high. Therefore, we can first desecrate a mana affix as a blocker. After that, we can use Sinistral Erasure Omen and Chaos Spam to roll the increased damage prefix. If the desecration affix is removed, we can simply add it back. After this step's done, we can Omen of Light and another mana, trying to roll a flat damage prefix with desecration. For the final prefix, just spam a perfect Exalted Orb. Here's something I'm not sure. For example, should I use basic Chaos Orbs or the greater version? To make decisions, I can run 2 simulations in Craft of Exile 2 and see which is cheaper. With all 3 methods covered, you can notice that all of them are RNG based. One-way path crafting is highly RNG based naturally. Deterministic crafting has a chance to break your gear, and rerolling crafting requires huge amount of rerolling. To fight this RNG, let's introduce a new method that can be used together with any of the 3 previous methods: batched crafting, or in a more common word, profitable crafting. We know that the more you craft using the same crafting workflow, the closer the average cost will be to the expected cost, so you won't be super unlucky. Furthermore, PoE 2 is a game with player-to-player trading, which means if you do craft multiple copies using the same workflow, you can sell the additional gears. So this is profitable crafting. Even if you don't intend to make currencies, you can use this method to fight the RNG. The selling price could be a little above the expected cost, or you can float it a bit based on the actual quality of the final gear. Now you need to mind 3 things. First, you need to make sure the gears can really sell. If you are crafting something no one else using, maybe profitable crafting is not applicable. And 2, if you are lucky enough and craft the first gear with cheaper than expected cost, maybe there's no need for additional crafting. And 3rd, before you craft, first search the trading site. Other players will also make use of this profitable crafting method, and their pricing may float based on the actual quality as well. The key is, a gear considered worse by other players may actually be better for you. For example, a spirit and evasion amulet may be considered worse if the spirit is of a low tier. However, suppose I don't need that much spirit in fact, I might consider an amulet with lower spirit and higher evasion better. Such difference makes it possible for you to find gears cheaper than the expected cost calculated by the crafting simulator. All in all, I believe this video gives you a big picture of the entire crafting method landscape in PoE 2, as well as a detailed explanation to one-way paths and deterministic crafting. However, I admit that the introduction to rerolling crafting is not that detailed and clear. Actually, there are many different crafting workflows and tricks, and you may need to adjust your workflow based on the actual price of different elements. But I hope my video can help you better understand other players' workflows and tricks. If you want to play games into depth together with me, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.